Who or what is God? Would you recognize God? And what happens if you don't? Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I am Adrian Fort, and we are here for a video which will appear in 3 separate playlists here on the channel. Number 1 being 30 must-read poems, number 2 being the poetry discussion playlist, and number 3 being an Emily Dickinson playlist, a playlist of videos dedicated exclusively to the greatest poet of all time. This video for I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died will have 3 separate sections: a biography, a breakdown of Emily Dickinson, and an analysis portion. So, who was Emily Dickinson? Emily Elizabeth Dickinson, the reclusive and enigmatic poet, was born December 10th, 1830, in Amherst, Massachusetts. For reference, this was the same year that the Church of Latter-day Saints was born and King George IV died. Ironically, in contrast with Emily's misanthropic propensities, her family was distinguished in the community. Notably, her father Edward was a lawyer and a trustee at Amherst College, a college her grandfather, Samuel, had had a hand in founding. But if her family name and her father loomed large in the community, Edward was inescapable in her life. Of her father, Emily said, "His heart was pure and terrible, and I think no other like it exists." Still, she respected him, even if her literary and intellectual proclivities were pursued in rebellion. If her father ran hot, it seems it was something she could understand, if not admire. Her relationship with her mother was colder. Emily Norcross Dickinson was said to be melancholic, and might today be described as depressive. Of her mother, Emily said, "She was an awful mother, but I liked her better than none." Far from a 5-star review, but we can recognize the signatures of both temperatures in her poetry. At 17 years old, Emily began attending Mary Lyons Mount Holyoke Female Seminary. She would attend the seminary all the way until May of the next year. The reasons for her leaving depend on who is relaying them. Whatever the reasons, like many geniuses, she did not finish her foray into post-secondary education. Shortly thereafter, Dickinson's relationship with Susan Gilbert would blossom and be further solidified in 1853 when Gilbert was engaged to Austin Dickinson, Emily's brother. Susan would then become Susan Gilbert Dickinson in 1856. During this same decade, Emily would embark on an introspective odyssey that would transform American letters and poetry altogether. The years from 1858 to 1865 are referred to as the writing years by Dickinson scholars. During this period, she wrote hundreds of poems, and by the end of this period, she had written over 1,100 of her 1,789 known poems. But she would end this period in her cousin's care after receiving treatment for what is now believed to have been iritis, an inflammation of the muscles in her eyes. If the humanitarian burden of writing 1,000 of the greatest poems to ever exist was not toilsome enough to cause her complete withdrawal, loss would be. Part of her instructions in order that she would keep her eyesight was that she had to stop reading. Emily Dickinson also struggled mightily to deal with death, and losing people who were important to her devastated her more each time it happened. During this period, she had remarked that before she could recover from one loss, she had lost someone else. And with hundreds of the greatest poems to ever be written still inside her mind, Emily Dickinson became the woman in white, dressing completely in white, never leaving her family's property, and even preferring to speak to people through the closed door to her bedroom. Emily Dickinson would publish only 10 poems during her lifetime. All of them were published without attribution. On May 15th, 1886, Emily Dickinson died after more than 2 years of battling what was known as Bright's disease, a type of kidney disease. Her final words were, "I must go in. The fog is rising." And in order to begin properly, it's important to start with the question, what kind of poetry did Emily Dickinson write? Well, Emily Dickinson was rare even amongst geniuses. And as is often the case with the uncommon amongst uncommon people, there is no way to pinpoint her, though her poetry is often described as lyric, romantic, and transcendental. So what do these words mean? Lyric poetry refers to a short poem, often with song-like qualities, that expresses the speaker's personal emotions and feelings. Historically intended to be sung and accompany musical instrumentation, lyric now describes a broad category of non-narrative poetry, including elegies, odes, and sonnets. Romantic poetry is a poetic movement of the late 18th and early 19th centuries that turned toward nature and the interior world of feeling in opposition to the mannered formalism and disciplined scientific inquiry of the Enlightenment era that preceded it. English poets such as William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, John Keats, Percy Bysshe Shelley, William Blake, and Lord Byron produced work that expressed spontaneous feelings, found parallels to their own emotional lives in the natural world, and celebrated creativity rather than logic. And finally, transcendentalism. Transcendentalism is an American literary, philosophical, religious, and political movement of the early 19th century centered around Ralph Waldo Emerson. Other important transcendentalists were Henry David Thoreau, Margaret Fuller, Lydia Marie Child, Amos Bronson Alcott, Frederick Henry Hedge, Elizabeth Palmer Peabody, and Theodore Parker. Stimulated by English and German Romanticism, the biblical criticism of Herder and Schleiermacher, and the skepticism of Hume, the Transcendentalists operated with the sense that a new era was at hand. They were critics of their contemporary society for its unthinking conformity, and urged that each person find in Emerson's words, quote, an original relation to the universe, end quote. Emerson and Thoreau sought this relation in solitude amidst nature and in their writing. By the 1840s, they, along with other transcendentalists, were engaged in the social experiments of Brook Farm, Fruitlands, and Walden, and by the 1850s, an increasingly urgent critique of American slavery. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for that last onset, when the king be witnessed in the room. I willed my keepsakes, signed away what portion of me be assignable, and then it was there interposed a fly, with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me. And then the windows failed, and then I could not see. This poem might seem at the onset, if you will, as something of a poem of coincidence. There was a really big thing happening, and I spaced off and started watching a fly. But there are some deeper and much more unsettling things going on under the surface of this poem. But first, let's take a look at this poem through those three lenses: lyric poem, transcendentalism, or romanticism and transcendentalism. I suggest that this is not the most lyric of poems, and certainly not the most lyric of Emily Dickinson poems, but romantic and transcendental? Yes, I think so. One of the hallmarks of romanticism is a little bit of a concentration on nature. Well, we have a fly here. It's hard to say that flies are unnatural. We have a storm here. Storms happen in nature all the time. We get back to the storm or to the fly here. And then another thing is an interior feeling. Interior feelings are important to romanticism, as romanticism longs to return to the individual. What is more interior a feeling than death? Haven't you heard that everyone dies alone? Indeed, you have. And then we have a little bit of emotion here as well. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm. Everyone is bracing for this loss. And what about transcendentalism? One of the hallmarks of transcendentalism is an original relationship to the universe, with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me. And then the windows failed, and then I could not see. Our individual here, our speaker, is separate from the light itself, separate from that thing which happens to all of those who are dying. If there is anything which is to be claimed an original relationship to the universe, certainly it is being separated from death itself. Another hallmark is that transcendentalist poets believe there is a new era at hand. This entire poem is about the oncoming of a new era. I heard a fly buzz when I died. Is there any newer an era than death itself? Because who has lived in death for very long? So one way to kind of summarize transcendentalism is, or at least start to think about it, is romanticism plus a god, plus God, plus the Bible. Well, we do have that here for that last onset when the king be witnessed in the room. So, what is there to talk about with this poem itself? Here's where I want to start. Death here is not welcoming. Death here seems to be laborious. Everyone is waiting around, and the dying is there too, kind of, and really still conscious. That sounds awful, doesn't it? Knowing that you're laying there to die? That's not a very comforting thought. That's not a very traditionally poetic thing about which we might write or talk or read. But deeper than that, more importantly than that, more disturbingly, than that. A question is begged by this poem itself. What happens after death? I heard a fly buzz when I died. Our speaker is already dead. Our speaker is speaking to us from beyond the grave. Clearly, they have passed away. But what bit do we get of the afterlife itself? Nothing. We get nothing from after the point other than the fact that our speaker is coming to us from there. Is that a hint in and of itself of what comes after death? Isn't that the great fear? That after death, there's just nothing. There's just nothingness. Our speaker is here from the afterlife, so apparently it's not nothing. But wouldn't this poem have a lot more to express if our speaker had gone, for example, to the Christian heaven or hell? Wouldn't it? But we get no mention of that. We get nothing from our speaker really on the idea of religion, of God. Or do we? The king being witnessed in the room, king being capitalized, we know this is God, his or herself. We know Emily Dickinson was a Christian, so we can put this in there, or at least was tenuously Christian, or was Christian at the early part of her life. I think is someone who struggled with the ideas of religion in general throughout her life. We have writings that make us believe that. I have writings that make me believe that king. Everyone was there gathering firm for that last moment, that last onset, when the king be witnessed in the room. But the king doesn't show up. The king is not there. The king does not come for our speaker. Or did he? Or did he? The king, God. The king is supposed to come for our speaker. Our speaker has died and did not say the king did come. Unless, well, if we go down here, unless the king is that fly. Unless the king is a fly, the king did not show up. This, too, is an original relationship with the universe. Where else in all of poetry is someone going to tell you that the Almighty is a fly? I heard a fly buzz when I died. Everyone was waiting for the king, and a fly showed up. Is this to spit on the idea of God? Everyone was waiting on the king, but it was just a fly that showed up. There was no king? Is this to say that the king does not care how you perceive him? He is going to show up as it is necessary for him. Did God decide to be a fly that day? Would you judge if he had? And if you do judge that he had, would you end up in limbo as seemingly our speaker is? Or if you didn't recognize God when he showed up as a fly, would you be left in limbo? There are three possibilities there. There's no God. God is the fly. Maybe God didn't come. There is a God. There is a death. And God said, meh, meh. Or was the king not recognized? That is what I have for this 30 must-read poems. This being I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died by Emily Dickinson. If you like or appreciate this sort of thing, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and I hope to have you back for the next one.